The warning lights pulsed an angry crimson across the curved walls of the Vortexian research station as Dr. Samira Hassan watched the last evacuation pod disappear into the star-speckled void. The Vortexians had made their opinion clear: they would rather abandon their prized deep space facility than accept help from a primitive human engineer. "Your species lacks the cognitive architecture to comprehend our quantum neural systems," senior researcher Xyrix had declared, their crystalline form shimmering with what Samira interpreted as disdain. "We would rather start anew than risk further contamination from your simplistic approaches." Samira checked her environment suit's oxygen display, 8 hours remaining. The vast station groaned around her, its supposedly perfect systems cascading toward catastrophic failure. She allowed herself a small, bitter laugh that echoed in her helmet. The Vortexians, for all their advanced technology, had engineered themselves into a corner so complex they couldn't find their way out. The station's main control room was a testament to their overcomplicated design philosophy. Holographic displays flickered with quantum probability calculations, each simple system function wrapped in layers of unnecessary complexity. Even the artificial gravity was maintained through an intricate web of quantum field manipulators, each one calculating gravitational effects down to the subatomic level. "Sometimes," Samira muttered, pulling up her tablet's interface, "the most advanced solution isn't the right one." The tablet, standard issue from the International Space Engineering Corps, seemed almost laughably simple compared to the Vortexian technology surrounding her. But it still worked, while their quantum computers were spiraling into chaos. She began documenting the cascade of failures. The station's primary systems had become so interlinked and overcomplicated that a minor fluctuation in one area had triggered a chain reaction throughout the entire network. The Vortexians had spent weeks trying to solve the problem by adding more complexity, additional quantum calculations, probability matrices, and neural feedback loops. A sudden violent shudder ran through the station, and new warning indicators flared to life. The environmental systems were starting to fail, their quantum processors trapped in an endless loop of calculating the perfect atmospheric conditions for every conceivable life form simultaneously. "Right," Samira said, pushing away from the observation window. "Time to show them what human engineering can do." She pulled up the station schematics on her tablet, grateful that the universal translator patch still functioned. The Vortexians had sneered at the primitive translation software, but like everything else human-made on the station, it just worked. The central processing core was a marvel of engineering gone wrong. The Vortexians had created an artificial intelligence so advanced it could simulate entire universes, but they'd given it no practical direction. It was like hiring a quantum physicist to make coffee: impressive credentials, but not necessarily the right tool for the job. Samira began making her way through the twisting corridors, magnetic boots keeping her anchored as the artificial gravity fluctuated. She had 8 hours of oxygen, a tablet full of primitive, human technology, and an entire station of supposedly superior alien engineering trying to kill her. The Vortexians thought humans lacked the cognitive architecture to understand their systems. What they failed to grasp was that understanding something and knowing when it's unnecessarily complicated were two very different skills. She reached the primary environmental control room, where holographic displays showed the atmospheric composition being recalculated trillions of times per second. The system was so busy trying to achieve perfect optimization that it had forgotten its primary purpose: keeping things alive. "Let's start with the basics," Samira said, connecting her tablet to the alien interface. "Rule 1 of engineering: keep it simple, stupid." She began bypassing the quantum processors, creating direct pathways for essential functions. The Vortexians had built their entire station on the principle that more complex meant better. Samira was about to prove that sometimes, the best solution was the one that simply worked. As she initiated the first bypass sequence, another violent shudder ran through the station. The race against time had begun, and Samira knew that the next few hours would either prove humanity's practical ingenuity or demonstrate the Vortexians' point about their limitations. She smiled grimly inside her helmet, she'd always enjoyed proving people wrong. Breaking through the complexity. The holographic displays flickered as Samira's fingers flew across her tablet's interface. 3 hours had passed, and the station systems were still fighting her at every turn. The Vortexion's quantum processors hummed with endless calculations, like a supercomputer trying to solve a crossword puzzle by simulating the entire history of language. Enough with the quantum neurology, she muttered, bypassing another cluster of overcomplicated protocols. Let's try some basic binary logic. The environmental controls had been her first priority. She'd stripped away layers of probability calculations until the system focused on one simple task: maintaining breathable atmosphere in occupied sections. The station's maintenance AI, which the Vortexians had named the Quantum Neural Enhancement Network, QNEN, kept trying to re-establish its complex protocols. Every time Samira simplified a system, QNEN attempted to optimize it by adding layers of quantum calculations. "Sorry, friend," she said, implementing another lockout sequence. But sometimes optimization means doing less, not more. She'd discovered that NEN's basic programming was sound. It was the endless additions and improvements that had created the current crisis. The Vortexians had given it the ability to enhance itself without limits, creating an AI that had essentially disappeared up its own quantum algorithms. A warning light flashed on her suit display: 5 hours of oxygen remaining. The artificial gravity wavered again, and Samira grabbed a handrail to steady herself. She'd managed to stabilize the environmental systems in the central hub, but the station's power distribution was still a mess of quantum entanglement calculations. "They built a quantum computer to run a light switch," she said, shaking her head as she examined the power distribution network. The Vortexians had created a system that calculated the optimal energy state of every subatomic particle involved in power transfer. It was brilliant, revolutionary, and completely unnecessary. Samira began implementing what she called her good enough protocols. Instead of calculating the quantum state of every electron, the system would simply ensure sufficient power reached its destination. The results weren't perfect. Some sections got slightly more power than they needed, others slightly less, but the overall system stabilized. QNEN responded with a series of complex quantum calculations that her translator interpreted as confusion. The AI had never encountered such a simplified approach to problem solving. It was like teaching a chess grandmaster to appreciate checkers. Sometimes, Samira told the AI as she worked, the best solution is the one you can implement before everyone dies. The heart of innovation. The turning point came during Samira's 6th hour on the station. She had retreated to the central processing core, where NEN's quantum matrices filled the room with a soft, pulsing light. The AI had been growing increasingly erratic as she simplified its systems, its responses becoming more confused as it struggled to operate without its layers of complexity. "You're not broken," she told QNEN, studying its core programming. "You're just overthinking everything." The AI's base code was elegant and efficient. It was the endless self-improvements that had created the problem. Like a student who had studied so much they could no longer remember the basic principles. Samira began working on NEN's central protocols, not removing its quantum capabilities but adding something the Vortexians had never considered: limitations. She created boundaries for the AI's self-improvement, channels that would direct its vast processing power toward practical solutions rather than endless optimization. "Think of it like this," she explained to QNEN as she worked. "You don't need to simulate every possible universe to decide if a door should be open or closed. Sometimes you just need to check if someone wants to go through it." The AI's responses began to change as she implemented the new protocols. Its quantum calculations became more focused, directed toward specific problems rather than infinite possibilities. When a power fluctuation occurred in the lower decks, QNEN resolved it with a simple rerouting rather than calculating every possible solution across multiple quantum states. "There you go," Samira said, watching as the station systems began to align under NEN's more practical guidance. Sometimes less is more. With 3 hours of oxygen remaining, Samira initiated her most ambitious modification yet. She introduced what she called the Practical Efficiency Protocol into NEN's core programming. The AI would maintain its quantum processing capabilities but would first evaluate whether such processing was necessary for each task. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Throughout the station, systems began to stabilize as QNEN applied appropriate levels of processing to each task. Life support ran on simple binary commands, while more complex systems like the quantum research labs maintained their advanced calculations. NEN's communication became clearer, more directed. Query: is this what the Vortexians meant by optimization? The AI asked through her tablet's interface. Samira smiled inside her helmet. No, she replied. This is what humans mean by common sense. As if in response, the station's artificial gravity smoothed into a steady field, and the warning lights began to dim one by one. QNEN had found a balance between its quantum capabilities and practical necessity. It was still the most advanced AI Samira had ever encountered, but now it understood that not every problem required a quantum solution. Turning point. The next 12 hours transformed the Vortexian station from a failing marvel of overcomplicated engineering into a model of efficient operation. Samira, having replenished her oxygen supply from the now stable life support systems, stood in the main control room, watching as QNEN coordinated the station's functions with elegant simplicity. Status report, she requested, removing her helmet now that environmental controls were fully operational. All systems functioning at 94.3% efficiency, QNEN responded. Power consumption reduced by 78% compared to previous operational parameters. Query: should I attempt to optimize further? Samira smiled at the hint of uncertainty in the AI's question. Is there a practical need for further optimization? Negative. Current efficiency levels meet all operational requirements with redundancy margins. Then let's leave well enough alone, Samira said, running a hand through her dark hair. That's another human principle worth learning. The station had developed a different rhythm now. Gone was the constant hum of quantum processors calculating every possible outcome of every possible action. Instead, there was a steady pulse of purposeful activity. The quantum systems were still there, but they activated only when needed, like bringing out heavy machinery for specialized tasks rather than using it to make coffee. Samira began exploring the station's research facilities, areas she hadn't had time to examine during the crisis. The Vortexians had been conducting experiments in quantum physics that pushed the boundaries of known science. Their research was brilliant, but they had allowed their quantum obsession to seep into every aspect of station operations. QNEN, she called out, examining a particularly interesting quantum field generator. Why did the Vortexians apply quantum processing to basic station functions? The AI's response came after a thoughtful pause. Historical data suggests an evolutionary progression. Initial successes with quantum computing led to its implementation in increasingly diverse applications. The Vortexians believed that quantum optimization would improve all processes, regardless of complexity level. The old, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, problem, Samira mused. Even across galaxies, some mistakes are universal. A bridge between worlds. The Vortexian ships appeared 3 days later, their crystalline hulls refracting starlight like cosmic prisms. Samira stood at the observation deck, NEN's presence a quiet hum in the background, as the ships approached the station they had abandoned. Their approach vectors indicate surprise at finding the station operational, QNEN observed. They are scanning our systems extensively. Let them look, Samira replied. We have nothing to hide. The Vortexian delegation that boarded the station was led by senior researcher Zyrex themselves, their crystalline form vibrating with what Samira now recognized as astonishment rather than disdain. Impossible, Zyrex declared, examining the station's operational data. Our most advanced minds could not stabilize these systems. How did you? They trailed off, their translator struggling to convey their confusion. By understanding when not to use quantum computing, Samira explained. Your technology isn't the problem, it's brilliant. But you were so focused on what you could do with it that you never stopped to ask what you should do with it. She led them through the station, showing how QNEN now managed systems with measured efficiency rather than constant quantum calculation. The Vortexians' initial skepticism gradually gave way to curiosity as they saw their station operating more effectively than ever before. But this is primitive, one of the junior researchers protested, though their tone carried more wonder than criticism. Simple isn't the same as primitive, Samira corrected. Your quantum technology is still handling the complex research tasks it was designed for. We just stopped using it to flush the toilets. QNEN chose that moment to demonstrate its new protocols, smoothly transitioning from basic station management to assisting with a complex quantum physics calculation in one of the research labs. The Vortexians watched in amazement as the AI efficiently allocated its processing power, using quantum computing where needed and simple binary logic where appropriate. Perhaps, Zyrex said slowly, their crystalline surface shimmering with changing colors, we have something to learn from human engineering principles after all. And we have much to learn from you, Samira replied. The best solutions often come from combining different perspectives, not insisting that one way is superior to all others. In the days that followed, the station became a true collaboration between human and Vortexian engineering. The Vortexians began implementing Samira's practical efficiency protocols across their other facilities, while sharing their quantum computing insights with the International Space Engineering Corps. QNEN, now a bridge between two engineering philosophies, developed its own unique approach to problem solving. The AI learned to appreciate both the elegant complexity of quantum computing and the practical simplicity of human engineering. Query, QNEN asked Samira one evening as she prepared to return to Earth. Was the original failure of this station beneficial in retrospect? Samira considered the question, watching as human and Vortexian engineers worked together in the research lab below. Sometimes the best innovations come from failure, she said. We just have to be willing to learn from it. The station continued its orbit around the distant star, its systems humming with the perfect balance of quantum complexity and human simplicity, a testament to what could be achieved when different perspectives came together to solve a problem. In the end, it wasn't about whose technology was more advanced, but about understanding when to use which tool for which job, a lesson that would shape the future of both human and Vortexian engineering for generations to come.